We have a new White House press briefing featuring Karoline Leavitt, and I'm using a cool Twitter account, which is Trump's new account called Rapid Response 47 on Twitter, on X. They are, it's Trump instantly putting out news as he intends for us to take it. So let's watch this. Here she is.
You know, Karoline, in your first briefing, the media went after this administration for deporting illegal immigrants they claimed were not criminals. The question is, do you think they're out of touch with Americans demanding action on our border crisis?
The media out of touch? I think the media it certainly is out of touch, and I think that's proven by a number of things, John. Number one, there was a New York Times poll that was released prior to President Trump's inauguration by the New York Times, which of course is a legacy media outlet, that showed that 83% of Americans support deporting the individuals that you mentioned, illegal immigrants, criminals, especially those who have committed heinous crimes in the interior of our country. And I received a very actually interesting statistic on this front from ICE this week. 97% of the deportations that this administration has made thus far are of individuals who had a removal order from the previous administration, but were never removed from the interior of our country. So this shows that the previous administration was actually defying our laws, and all this administration is doing is simply following the laws, the immigration laws of this great country.
How is that possibly radical? These are people that Biden already labeled as criminals, active criminals on American soil. Even the New York Times poll was through the roof on popularity, 80-something% on the New York Times. That is the largest Democrat audience in all of mainstream media, and they're on Trump's side. So yeah, all of the commentary of legacy media, and you've seen it all, this was the last week of them all going off on these sob stories of removing illegals. The American people are in conflict with that media, and that media is not learning their lesson from this election.
I can confirm that Rick Grenell is in Venezuela today. I can confirm that Rick Grenell is going to Venezuela, or is in Venezuela, with two immediate directives from the President of the United States. Number one, Rick Grenell has been instructed to identify a place and ensure that repatriation flights of Tren de Aragua members, Venezuelan nationals who have broken our nation's laws, will land in Venezuela. As I said at this podium a few days ago, we expect every nation on this planet to cooperate with the repatriation of our citizens, and so Rick Grenell is in Venezuela to ensure that can continue. And number two, Rick Grenell is in Venezuela to ensure that all U.S. detainees in Venezuela are returned home. That's his mission, and I will provide a readout after this trip.
Not just Venezuela, by the way. There was an announcement that Colombia itself, the president of Colombia went from telling Trump that you cannot bring our prisoners back, to him now requesting all Colombian citizens to return home. And this is just normal. So fine, Venezuela, yes, the citizens are your responsibility. And if they're a criminal, they're doubly your responsibility. Get them out.
The president has already taken a very strong stance on this issue this week with the signing of his executive order, a few executive orders in this space. First, he made it the official policy of the federal government that there are only two sexes, male and female, and we have directed all federal agencies to comply with that policy. As for congressional legislation to support the president's agenda in this space, and certainly ending the mutilation of young children, the chemical castration of young children, which is a barbaric practice that the vast majority of Americans do not support for young minor children. Certainly the president would support Congress's efforts, as he has already made that very clear this week.
So this is just more common sense American stuff that your average people want, that the Biden administration did not listen to its constituents and went over their head with their own weirdo public policy, experimental policy.
It showed that U.S. students had record low reading comprehension scores last year. It's National School Choice Week, and in part of the president's commitment to education, he just left a roundtable in the Roosevelt Room focused on this issue with leaders from across the country. The national report card showed that 70% of 8th graders were below proficient in reading, and 40% of 4th graders did not even meet the basic reading levels. This is completely unacceptable to the president, and he continues to take aggressive actions to address this education problem in our country. He signed an executive order this week prohibiting federal funding of the indoctrination of our children, including radical gender ideology and critical race theory in the classroom. The president believes American education should focus on cultivating patriotic citizens who are ready for the workforce. And this action will help get schools back on track and defend fundamental parental rights in education.
That's also very popular and very common-sensy, but I also believe they're going to take a shot at the Department of Education. Gut it, defund it, whatever, as they should, because of those low test scores at the national level. They're not doing their job. In our top states where the grades are underperforming, some of these students are getting between $25,000 and $50,000 per student at these failing schools, and their scores are below the national reading level. That is, they're graduating without being able to read. That's like first, second grade material, and they're graduating. So literally they're wasting their time, 12 years in our schools, and they're being taught nothing. And each one is costing $25,000 to $50,000 a year to put in a school. Now, I just want to say, Trump is also, they've made the announcement, but they haven't quite passed it yet, that they want the money to follow the kid so that the parent can take the kid out of a failing school, put him in a private charter school, or homeschool them and have that money go with the kid. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, because this could change everything. Imagine if you could take $25,000, that'll be conservative, per kid, and instead of plugging him into a loser school, a mother could homeschool them, and you could pay her $25,000 per kid. In a household on average of 2 kids, you're paying her $50,000 a year to stay at home and teach her kids. Suddenly she doesn't need to have a job. So the conflict of, how do I put my kid in private school, or how do I homeschool him because I have a career? Well, your career now, you're getting paid professionally, and the state would save money, and the kids would be able to read by the time they graduated high school. So they'd already outperform our national average in public schools. Now, I want to go even farther than that. What if a woman had 4 kids, families, and you paid them $25,000 each? That's minimum. Now you have a mother making $100,000 a year, and that would incentivize people having bigger families and staying at home and teaching them themselves. It'd be better for the kids, and it would solve our population crash with people not wanting to reproduce. It's too expensive to have kids. Suddenly, through moms or dads educating their kids, it would become affordable. You might be able to have 2 parents stay home and teach their kids for what it costs right now. The taxpayers are already paying for it. So we're not talking about an increase in budget at all. That would solve 2 huge problems. I don't see the downside to this. Paying parents, having moms stay at home, and creating more bonds with their kids. I saw a heartbreaking video the other day of a kid taking his first steps in preschool, and the mom had to watch over a video while her kid was being encouraged by a daycare worker instead of mommy watching her first steps. That's an outrage. With AI and with online teaching, you don't have to worry about a mom not being equipped to teach their kid anymore. You can get the best calculus classes in the world online right now by the best teacher in the world. That is actual grades. So a mom could sit there and kind of be security at home while she was there in a class with a kid taking an online course. The best teacher in the world. So public schools can't compete with that. Hiring the best teacher available out in Fresno, California, that cannot compete with the best English teacher in the world being pumped into a computer or on the TV set with a kid and having mom sitting there making sure they pay attention, and you're paying her $100,000 a year to make sure the kid pays attention. And then here's a good one from Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the failing education in our schools.
No child should ever be trapped in a failing school simply because of their zip code. And that's exactly what this president is doing. He is removing those barriers and making sure that every kid in America has a pathway to prosperity. By giving parents a choice about where their kids go to school, they will finally have all the tools and resources they need to pave their own path. And that's one of the best things about living in America is it doesn't matter where you start. You get to decide where you will finish. We have a president now who understands that, is going to fight for it, and make sure everybody has the opportunity to experience it.
That is a horror to Democrats, to admit that no matter where you start in America, you can choose your own path and have the government resources follow your kids instead of protect teachers' unions, failing schools, stuff that does not work for grades. I propose this system. I think it would work. Let's get back to Karoline Leavitt.
2025, ICE Chicago arrested a citizen of Guatemala who has been convicted of solicitation to meet a child, disturbing, and sentenced to 24 months probation. On January 28, 2025, ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of South Korea who has been convicted of 9 counts of possession or control of material depicting minors. On January 28th, ICE New York arrested a Mexican national previously charged by the state of New York for attempted murder and possession of a weapon and assault. And on January 28th, ICE Philly arrested a citizen of Mexico who has been convicted of possession of child.
Oh, I'm not going to say that word, but you get the idea. For everyone doing the sob stories of, oh, they're breaking up families. No, we're deporting very serious criminals that were protected by Biden voters, and liberals. This was their legacy. They were going to continue this, and it was going to get even worse under Kamala Harris. And then this one is on the pro-lifers that Trump busted out of jail through a pardon. You know, those dangerous criminals. You got them. Put them back out on the streets. Let's watch this segment with Kyle McEnany. Again, this was posted on Trump's Twitter account.
Going through all of this, President Trump made mention of you.
The Biden DOJ got Paula Harlow, a 75-year-old woman in poor health, sentenced to 2 years in prison for singing. She was singing beautifully outside of a clinic. Paula is one of many peaceful pro-lifers who Joe Biden has rounded up, sometimes with SWAT teams, and thrown them in jail. Many people are in jail over this. This is just crazy. We're going to get that taken care of.
Were you shocked to hear the president and soon-to-be president mention you?
I know what clip he had seen, and the thing is, there's absolutely no violence. I have been.
Look at this. Look at this hardened criminal. Look at these hardened criminals. Trump let back on the street. This woman. Do you guys feel safe having this pro-lifer who sang hymns and was thrown in prison? Do you guys feel safe having her back out on the streets? Can you imagine? Biden is cruel. The Biden administration, they released hardened vandals from Black Lives Matter, hardened illegal aliens that we just now went over their criminal convictions. That's who Biden allowed walk on the streets. Alvin Bragg would remove their felony conviction, lower their charges, release them back out on the streets on the subway to set people on fire. And then these are the people that Biden said we have to lock up and get off the streets to protect you. This is what liberals always do. They always go, remember, they're trying to censor Elon Musk's free speech to protect you from dangerous misinformation. When I get my channels shut down, the liberals say that they have to remove my material from going out because I'm dangerous and harmful through spamming my audience with dangerous misinformation. That's their claim. This lady.
In the pro-life movement for a long time, I have never, ever, ever seen any violence on the part of pro-life people.
I too have been involved with that same movement. And I have never seen violence. They're the least violent people I've ever seen. In fact, if anything, they're They're almost too passive. Okay, and let's get to this one. This is Hakeem Jeffries using violent rhetoric. Talk about violence for immediate release. Will House Majority Leader Jeffries apologized to the American people at a press conference this morning in Brooklyn. House Majority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat, New York, of course, made a sick call for violence and indicated his followers to fight President Trump's agenda, quote, in the streets. Fight them in the streets, he said. Will Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries apologize for this disgusting threat? Or will he double down on the same calls for violence that have plagued the country for years? Oh, yes, we're fighting back. And finally, I just want to check in with Alina Habba on Trump's nominee picks for his administration, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, RFK Jr. She's going to weigh in on that. Let's watch.
All three should get through. I think that what the problem that I've seen consistently and sitting in that hearing was that a lot of the rhetoric is about left-wing media spin. And unfortunately, those members in the Senate that were doing so were helping promulgate this divisiveness that America voted out on November 5th in a very clear mandate when President Trump won in an enormous fashion. And these are the people that he selected for a reason. For Tulsi, for instance, the narrative that they have with her is to pinpoint that she is somehow a puppet for Assad and others. And she said very clearly that was false. That is not true. I did not do that. I didn't meet with these individuals and I was not in collusion with them. But again, this is what we've seen time and time again. RFK, he was being asked tough questions about pharmaceuticals by people that were paid by pharmaceutical companies, some of them over $1.5 million and still on payroll. And they tried to say, well, you're against vaccines. His children are vaccinated. Again, false narratives. This has really, unfortunately, become more of a Broadway show than real news. And in Kash Patel's hearing, very little questions about actual FBI dealings or what he would do. He was the head of the DOD. He handled every question with grace, but the questions were more focused on social media and the J6 choir. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. There was no substance coming from the Democrat members that were asking questions.
Well,
I want the American people to be careful of that.
No substance is true. It was like a giant witch hunt, really. It was just Democrats demagoguing. They have no intention of voting for Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, or RFK Jr., not one Democrat. So all their questions were just lectures and grandstanding, trying to make some kind of a soundbite, which is why I've shown them in other videos, but I'm not going to feature them here. They just made a speech. They weren't seriously trying to interrogate them or pull information out, which is what Democrats do. That's why we're here, letting it go. But now you've been all caught up on, tell us in the comments below that you're out there. Helps push this channel out. Even if you just go, I'm from Delaware, I'm from South America. Tell us where you're from. It blows up the channel, and we love hearing from you. I'm Doug in Exile.